There's been a lot of conjecture about grazing management and the role it plays in building soil carbon. So we decided to address this issue from two fronts. The first was to do a meta-analysis, which is a review of all the research done in Australia to look at the evidence about building soil carbon, and then also to utilise a long-term grazing management trial that we've got here in Orange.
So as part of the project, we undertook a review and meta-analysis of studies within Australia that examined the effects of grazing management on soil carbon and drivers of soil carbon sequestration. Of the studies that examined the effects of grazing intensity, we found 13 studies. The majority of those didn't actually report a significant effect of intensity on carbon. 3 studies did report an effect, and that was generally a negative effect with increasing grazing intensity.
We started this trial looking at different types of grazing management in Orange back in 2012. The aim was to look at how stocking rate, paddock number, rotation speed and flexible movement strategies affect soils, pastures, animals and whole farm economics. One of the reasons we need long-term trials is we get to look at different management treatments over a long period of time. We not only see what happens in one year, but we can look at these seasonal effects. The way we've established a trial is we chose a paddock that was newly sown to introduce pasture, which is Coxfoot phalaris fescue with some clovers, white clover and subclover. And then we subdivided it up into the different grazing management treatments. So we have continuous grazing at a high stocking rate, about 14 DSE per hectare, and then a low stocking rate at about 8 DSE per hectare, and then the different rotational treatments at the same stocking rates. We've also got one flexible grazing treatment where we graze the pasture based on the plant development, and we only graze as many animals as the pasture we've got available at the time. So overall, across the 10 years that we've monitored soil carbon on this site, we've found that on average it's increased about 0.7 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year, but that's been across all treatments. During those dry years, the soil carbon sequestration flattened out, so we didn't have any build-up, and then it was higher in the years where we had average to above average rainfall. The difference in grazing management, which is the key part that we were really interested in, we found that on average, the continuous grazing treatments had a lower carbon sequestration than rotational treatments, but it was only less than 0.2 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. So the overall influence of grazing management is relatively small. The implications for producers from the meta-analysis and from this long-term trial is that we don't see that grazing management is a way to store large amounts of carbon in the soil on its own. It needs to be part of a package where we're addressing some of the other key constraints of soil carbon. The things that do build soil carbon are addressing nutrient deficiencies in the soil or changing from cropping to permanent pasture.
So while we haven't been able to find much evidence of a direct effect of grazing management on soil carbon in Australia, we did find evidence of benefits to plant biomass and ground cover through managing grazing. And so that can affect carbon inputs into the soil as well as retention. What the literature recommends to increase soil carbon in grazing systems is to manage grazing to promote radial grasses or C4 grasses, nitrogen fixing legumes, and increasing ground cover to reduce that erosion risk.
One of the first things to consider when you're doing anything with carbon is to actually understand the emissions for your business, because that's a future liability that you will be responsible for. And then the likely potential for carbon sequestration if you're going to need that sequestration to offset your own emissions, or whether you've got additional sequestration that you can then sell into a carbon market. And then we also have risks coming at us in the future as well, with expected climate change, warming and potentially lower soil moisture to help sustain the pasture growth and productivity that would then keep that soil carbon in the ground. There's a lot of benefits to grazing management in your business, things about maintaining ground cover, pasture persistence. There's sustainability elements. Soil carbon is only part of that story. We shouldn't just focus on carbon in this. We need to look at our whole farm resource management and make sure that we're addressing all the things we need to when we're looking at changing strategies.